48 of chapter 2. O Dhananjaya, Arjuna, immerse yourself in the thought of yoga, union with God, inwardly non-attached and even-minded in both success and failure. Perfect evenness of mind and feeling is itself the definition of yoga. This is one of the most important slokas or stanzas in the Bhagavad Gita. Patanjali said that the definition of yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the neutralization of the vortices, not waves. Waves don't have that kind of magnetism. A vortex is a whirlpool that draws everything into a center. And these waves of chitta, of feeling, this is the problem with Maya and with ego. You have these waves of feeling that draw you in, draw them into yourself. I want that ice cream cone. So you keep having that thought, drawing it to you. Sooner or later, you will get that ice cream cone, and it might free you. And many people think that the way to freedom is just to satisfy their desires, and finally they'll get rid of them. The trouble is that each desire satisfied creates more desires, and it can go on endlessly. So what we need to do is not only get rid of these little vrittis or vortices of desire and attachment, but above all the vortex of ego itself, which is the great whirlpool, drawing all desires into that whirlpool. We must get rid of this sense of ego. And how can we do it? By even-mindedness. My guru used to say, be even-minded and cheerful. In other words, not even-minded and apathetic, even-minded and cheerful. Just feel that God is behind everything and enjoy His presence in everything. So, immerse yourself in the thought of yoga. And this means to practice the presence of God all the time. Immerse yourself in the thought that He is mine and I am His. The practice of japa is very important. Just as I've said before, chant one of the classical mantras like Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram Om, Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram Om. A melody instead of only words. Melody touches the heart more. And if you're singing a melody, it helps to really lift your mind. Maha Mantra is very good too. And all those mantras are wonderful. It helps also to sing spiritual songs. I've written many, and I would suggest that you try to learn some of them because they give more variety and keeps the mind more involved that way. But they are absolutely a wonderful way of lifting the mind. The practice of writing music just came to me as a divine gift. I just, suddenly it occurred to me that it might be a way to share with people. And I asked God, and all of a sudden a melody was there. And again, I've written over 400 pieces of music, instrumental, vocal, all sorts of things. But all because that feeling that you get from these songs is something that brings you into the thought of God more completely. Music of all the arts is the most immediate, much more important, I think, than painting. And so he says, immerse yourself in the thought of God. Feel yourself completely just as if drowning in the thought of God. Everything you do, there's certain things that different saints have said that are well worth listening to. Like, and I've quoted some of them before, like St. John of the Cross in Spain, who said that one act of divine love is worth more than all the spiritual service that is rendered by monks and nuns and religious people. Just to love God is the whole thing. And it's the only thing. Who was it? So some other saint, I forget his name right now. But he said just to love God, that's the only thing worth doing. And Saint Jean Vianney in France said, if you only knew how much God loves you, you would die for joy. This thought of God's love, develop that feeling in your heart. Don't think of God just as an abstraction. Don't be immersed in him in the thought of his philosophy and philosophical truths and so on. This is why it says a few stanzas before this that when you really know the Vedas, when you really know God, it's worth more than all the Vedas. It's like not. Well, how did he put it? That it's no more use than a well when the land is all flooded with water. So the thought of God and the thought of God's love, practice it daily. Set time aside every day to think of him in that way. When you go to bed at night, say to God, always pray to God, don't go to sleep until you feel his presence. And then say to him, I don't want this. Build a bonfire, as I've suggested before, and throw into that bonfire all attachments, all desires, all likes and dislikes. Just say, I'm free of all of that. The mind is burdened with these things. It's like carrying a heavy sack on your shoulders. I've often thought of the ego with all its self-definitions. I'm a Frenchman, I'm Italian, I'm Indian, I'm an American, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm old, I'm young, I'm rich, I'm poor, I like books, I don't like to read. All the self-definitions that people not only develop but are proud of. You have to shed all of those. You're none of those. When you've gotten rid of the thought that this is you and that is you and the other thing is you, when you understand that you're just a part of him and he is your reality. I've used the illustration of the moon in pots of water reflected there. It looks like many moons, but it's all one moon reflected in those many pots. And so that one divine consciousness is reflected in you and in me and in other people, but it's all that one consciousness. We have to get rid of that thought that we are separate from him. We have to know that that one consciousness is our reality. And how can we do it? First of all, by becoming calm. A pot of water under the moon, there may be wind on that pot, and therefore the water is all disturbed and you can't see that reflection. And so it is that when your pot of water, your little mind and ego, are disturbed by anything, you won't be able to get the truth behind it. Anything that you observe, don't be emotionally involved in it. This is the real meaning behind science's discovery that you should eliminate feeling. But they're wrong because it's not feeling. They're talking about the upsets of emotion and so on. And there are plenty of scientists who are absolutely bigoted. In fact, I've pretty well given up on science because it's always changing its mind. Every 10 years or so, some major belief in science is completely overthrown. The only teaching that never changes is the spiritual truth. That's why when Christian missionaries came to India, they thought that Krishna must have lived after Jesus because he said the same things. Truth is always the same. And the other beautiful thing is that even though it's the same, it's always new, it's always different. In some way, I've mentioned this too before, and it's well worth speaking of. I had this feeling that Westerners are trained in Aristotelian logic. A thing is either this or that, it can't be both. And I was very puzzled for a while how anybody could think and how my guru could think that a truth can have many different explanations. But when I came to India and began talking to people, I began to realize that this way of thinking is actually a great deal more sophisticated, that any truth will have many different ramifications. As I said, a man can be a father, a husband, a father, a son, a brother, all sorts of things. So every truth must be understood that way, and it can only be understood by the heart. Science will never get the truth in its way. When you have a lake of ice, you can't break through the ice at all points. You have to go to one point and drill there. You have to go to your own ego and drill there. When you get behind this ego and its motivations, then you know what the truth is. So becoming even-minded and cheerful is one way of penetrating through that block of ice that is the ego, at that one point where you can do it, the ego itself. And when you break through that, By not allowing your mind to get upset and ruffled and desireful and so on, when your mind is even-minded and cheerful, then you can penetrate down through its movements to the hidden depths, which is God's presence. So Krishna is saying here that we must learn to become immersed in yoga. That means don't think about yourself, don't think about anything, just think about your oneness with God. And everything you do when you're eating, that's why it's a good thing to say a prayer before eating. Heavenly Father, my Guru had this prayer, receive this food, make it holy. Let no impurity of greed defile it. The food comes from Thee. It is to build Thy temple, spiritualize it. Spirit to spirit goes. We are the petals of Thy manifestation, but Thou art the flower. Its life, beauty, and loveliness permeate our souls with the fragrance of Thy presence. And in the Gita it also says that food comes from God, food goes back to God. And to eat food with personal enjoyment is sin. You must understand that everything is God. So the more you think that way, so that when you're at work, think that you're doing this work for God. When you're with your family, think these are God's children, not my children. When you see your neighbors, don't think they, think we. We're all a part of the same thing. It's a wonderful thing to walk in the streets and look at people's faces and see in them that every one of them is seeking that same bliss. They may be seeking it in different ways. They are seeking it in different ways. In fact, that is one of the wonderful things about this whole scene, this whole mad show, that everybody has his own approach to bliss. Bliss is infinite, infinitely varied. It's just incredible that every being in this world will find bliss in a different way. And that's why it's also good not to criticize anybody, because everybody will find it in his way, and it will be right for him. But when you see these people all so varied, and yet all seeking the same thing, how can you help loving everybody? You can't. Because they're all looking for what you're looking for, and even the worst criminal, he doesn't know that that's what he's looking for, but that is what he is looking for. When you look at faces in the streets like that, you see all that variety, and realize they're all looking for that bliss, and that they're really, in that sense, your own brothers and sisters. You begin to feel that everybody is your own. This is a lovely experience. And you can find that going through the streets of a crowded city, you can feel so much bliss in this simple thought. Look for reasons to be blissful. That is one. The different things that people do that they hope to find fulfillment in doing. Don't speak critically of them. Just realize that's his way of finding bliss. I tried to find bliss in this life by wanting to help other people. I had reached that point where that's what I wanted to do. But those who think only of helping themselves, they too are looking for that. They just aren't finding it in the right way yet, but they will. Everything, finally, this whole show has no other meaning than a variety show of bliss. It's a movie. My guru one time told about seeing a beautiful spiritual movie called The Song of Bernadette. Bernadette was the Saint Bernadette of Lourdes, where many healings and so on, miraculous cures have taken place. But some of the experiences she went through in her life were very reminiscent of things that my guru had been through also. And he was feeling sympathetic sorrow for her. And then he looked up and he saw the telephone, the projection booth, and the light behind that film, the film that was running through the camera or whatever the projector, was just a plain white light. And so he thought that's how God is. He just projects through this film of temporary experience, but it's all his light, and this whole world is nothing but shadows and light. There is no reality to it. It will help you very much to think to yourself, this is all just shadows. It isn't real, it doesn't exist. It will help you very much in your life to understand that even if things seem real for a while, they'll leave you in time. You will leave them. What does it matter? Don't be immersed in them. And when you are eating, feel that God is eating through you. When you are talking, feel that you are talking to God and God is talking through you. Feel that everything you do, try to immerse yourself in the thought of Him. And everything you see, try to let it be a reminder of Him. Actually, it's a wonderful experience to do this. Life becomes so rich when you do. And you will find that bit by bit, this divine presence within you is something that is all yours. It's living with my Guru was a wonderful thing because he kept bringing us back to that thought of God. One time he was talking about politics. He was a king himself in other lives, and it was a natural thing for him to think about. Then he paused a moment, he said, from God to politics. That's his drama. So we have to keep pulling it back from that drama and putting our minds back on the infinite. But how wonderful it was to be with him. I would walk with him in the desert, and sometimes I'd have to hold him because he almost fell down. And he would say, it's so difficult for me to remember which body I'm supposed to be moving. I'm in all bodies. And so it was that living with him helped me to understand that that one God is the only reality I'm seeking, the only reality there is. Immerse yourself in that. Inwardly be non-attached and even-minded to both success and failure, so that whatever happens in your life, let it be. You will find that if you have that attitude, you will succeed much better than if you don't care. Be non-attached, but care. Care to do it right for God. Joy to you.